Recently, I've been doing a series on all of the books in Fear and Hunger, which you may have seen here on my YouTube channel or on my TikTok account. In reading them, I again came across the books for Pocketcat, which led me down a rabbit hole about who Pocketcat is and what they really want to achieve. I trolled through many YouTube videos from different creators and also several different Reddit posts, some more worrying than others. But after tearing through just about everything I could find, I decided to pretty much compile it into one place for anyone else who has a similar interest in this peculiar entity. As we go through, I'll be referencing each person or place I've taken influence from, and I'll also list them all in the description with links to the videos. To save confusion, I'll also be referring to the first Fear and Hunger as just Fear and Hunger, and the second as Termina from here out. Before we go much further, I'm going to issue a quick content warning. Fear and Hunger and Termina are both 18 plus games. They are for mature audiences only, and they depict instances of nudity, sexual violence, child abuse, war, drug misuse and alcohol misuse, violence, gore, acts of self-destructiveness such as self-harm, suicide, and other mental health issues other than addiction. There's also mentions of depression, anxiety, PTSD, among others. With that out of the way, who, or rather what, is Pocketcat? From the books in both Fear and Hunger and Termina, they share stories very similar to fairy tales by Brothers Grimm or Hans Christian Andersen. Examples like Red Riding Hood and Hansel and Gretel come to mind. In both tales, we follow a young boy, Willem, who meets Pocketcat in the woods. In Termina, the book states that the story is written more akin to the older tales, which has suggested to many players that the books in each game don't relate to one another, despite Termina being set 300 years after Fear and Hunger. And so being written in the more classic style could mean in the style of Fear and Hunger's time period. I believe that the books in both games are actually one story which links together, much like how Pinocchio was initially released in chapter installments in a newspaper before being compiled into one edition. If we do link the two stories, it actually runs pretty coherently from Termina's Tale of the Pocketcat chapters 1 and 2, and then to Fear and Hunger's Tale of the Pocketcat chapter 1 and 2. It was a rainy day in the countryside, just north from the forest of Merwood. Willem, the most mischievous child known in the town, stared at the raindrops behind his window screen, just longing for an adventure. His mother would warn him of going outside. Rain brings forth all kinds of dangers not otherwise known to little boys. During downpour, decent boys should help their parents with various household chores instead. Being the pompous boy he was, Willem refused to give a helping hand. The consequences of such refusals were all too familiar to Willem. He'd get sentenced to bed without a dinner, and so he did. Crying under his blanket, fits of Willem's anger brought forth his reflection from a mirror on the wall. The boy from the mirror introduced himself as Melly, the sleeping twin brother of Willem that came to this world far too early, and thus he could only view the world from the land of opposites. Melly wanted to warn his brother of the coming calamity, but words echoed from the land of opposites, so they came out all wrong. Now his words encouraged Willem to join the coming adventure that was heading this way, heading fast. In fact, the adventure already squeezed itself through a small keyhole on the window frame. A large beetleman climbed in from the window. The beetleman was tall, taller than Willem's father, and rounder than his father as well. The face of the beetleman was obscured. He wore a similar mask Willem's grandfather had worn in the war to avoid gas from melting his eyes and burning his lungs. Terkello, the beetleman, had an urgent mission from Willem. You see, the ancient kingdom TORO'S came from was under a serious threat, and Willem was the only boy who could help. Willem was a bit hesitant, but TORO'S was already forcing the boy out from his bedroom window out to the rain. "We got no time for thinking," said TORO'S. The beetleman showed the way with his lantern. Only Willem had trouble keeping up with the pace as TORO'S flew fast deep inside the merwood with his man-beetle wings. TORO'S lantern got more distant until Willem couldn't see it no more. Hopeless, and now lost in the woods, he started crying, not unlike how small songthrush chicks cry and beg their mother for food. And just like that, a giant songthrush grabbed Willem and took him to a treetop nest full of chicks fighting for their place in the world. Willem tried to beg for a tasty worm from the bird mother, but competition was fierce. Those chicks knew that to succeed in life, you have to push the competition over nest boundaries. Willem tried, but ultimately fell off the nest. Just as he was about to meet his maker, TORO'S swooped by him and grabbed Willem with his cold man-beetle hands. TORO'S scolded Willem from wandering off. When Willem tried to explain what had happened, that only aggravated the beetle man even more. To teach Willem a lesson, TORO'S kept pushing Willem deeper to the forest with his freakish man-beetle strength. Willem slid down a muddy hill and found himself in a large opening in the forest. In the middle of that opening, 2 giant baby-faced blindworms were caught in a wrestling match. The 2 poor bastards fought each other with all they got. They bit each other, clawed each other, all while crying and wallowing loudly. TORO'S yelled from above that this is the nature of men. That just like those songthrush chicks from earlier, this would be Willem's future once he grew up to be an adult. Humans were ruthless in their pursuit for riches and wealth. Did Willem really want to take part in such fierce competition? While the 2 talked, the other, the more ugly-faced blindworm, had bested the other. Hungry for more devastation, the thing set its eyes on Willem. It gave Willem a desperate chase. TORO'S just flew away cackling. "This is what you wanted, right?" Willem ran to a nearby thicket in hopes that the blindworm couldn't fit there. Instead, the beast thrusted itself past broken branches with ferocious force. Fat from eating his other baby-faced blindworm sibling, one particularly sharp branch punctured the belly of the beast, and from within hundreds of small blindworm babies spilled all over the place. The little worms started wrestling and devouring each other the moment they landed on the ground. Willem realised this is how the giant baby-faced blindworms got so big to begin with. They kept eating each other until only one remained. For now it seemed like Willem was safe. It was not yet his turn to devour or be devoured. For some reason he did not feel comfortable though. It felt like someone or something was keenly watching his every move. He heard a faint panting and rustling of leaves. Then he noticed them. A pair of glowing eyes staring right at him from the darkness in shrubs and leaves. Willem did not like how the stare felt, panicked and ran to the opposite direction. Little did Willem know at the time, but what followed his every move from the behind bush was the tall cat, the Pocketcat himself. Rest of the text is unintelligible and smudged over. It looks like someone didn't want you to read any further for whatever reason. At the end here, before being stopped from reading on by the smudges in the book, Willem finds Pocketcat in the woods on a rainy day, which is pretty much where the story starts in the Fear and Hunger books. It was a rainy day in the countryside just north from the forest of Merwood. Willem, the wildest child known in the town, would stare at the raindrops behind the window screen. His mother would warn him of going outside. During rain, decent boys would help their parents with various indoor tasks. Rain brings forth all kinds of dangers not otherwise known to little boys. Disregarding the warnings and without a worry in the world, Willem dashed through the bushes and ran deep into the Merwood forest. In the heart of the forest, all wet from the rain, Willem heard slight panting noises from an overgrown grotto nearby. Cautiously, Willem peeked through the leaves. He would not believe his eyes when he saw a finely dressed cat standing on 2 feet, twice as tall as Willem's father would be. The cat's back was facing Willem. Its hand was moving swiftly inside its pocket while the 2 big yellow eyes gleamed inside a burlap bag in great excitement. Suddenly, the hand movement came to a halt. Even if Willem was well hidden behind the leaves, slowly the cat turned its eyes towards him. In terror, Willem ran as fast as he could towards his home. The 2 glowing yellow eyes of the cat haunted him all the way to his home gates. His mother was there to meet him by the front door. "So, you just had to go to the woods, did you?" said his mother. "You saw something you shouldn't have, right?" questioned his mother. "And how do I know this?" Willem's mother would go inside to get a little parcel with decorated wrappings. This appeared on the front door just before you came. It was directed to young Mr. Willem. Slowly, Willem unwrapped the decorated paper with small mouse prints on it. Inside the parcel, there was catnip. The town of Merwood was in festive mood. It was the beginning of the harvest season and food was plentiful. Willem's mother and father were arranging a large party for all the big families of the town. Even some noble ones were supposed to show up from outside of town. Willem had to wear his Sunday suit, the suit he would typically wear when going to the church on Sundays. Needless to say, the suit wasn't to Willem's liking. Now, you know we need to make good impressions to the city folk," his mother would say. "Why should I care?" said Willem. Willem's mother would pull him by the ear violently and say, "Don't you understand our livelihood depends on those noble and the fancy?" Willem shrugged it off and nodded. It's important to obey your parents after all if you're to grow up even somewhat decent and moral. It's even written on the Book of our Lord, the Bible of Olmer. The party guests started coming as the sun set. The festive people were of all kinds. You had the well-eaten mayor of the town with his wife who was so young she couldn't have been more than 3 years older than Willem. You had the Parkinsons from the next door with their faces forever set on an expression of pure disgust. There were also many people Willem had never seen before. Especially one gay gentleman with a constant grin on his face caught Willem's attention. The man also noticed young Willem. He winked his eye, even though otherwise his face was set on the same grin all the time. The gentleman gave Willem Jeepers Creepers. As the full moon had risen the highest, and the festive people were at their most cocked, Willem noticed the gay gentleman gone. After a short search, he found the man from their backyard howling at the moon. This already made young Willem very nervous, but then the man turned his gaze toward Willem. His eyes were the same as the 2 haunting yellow eyes Willem had seen in the Merwood forest some days ago. Suddenly, Willem realised the size of the man. For some reason he had not realised it before, but the man was almost the same height as that house. With a cat-like expression, the man would say, "Fancy meeting you here, young mister." The illustration on the book looks very lifelike. The Pocketcat seems to stare straight at you from the book pages. The Pocketcat would say, "So, how do you think we should handle the situation now you've seen something you shouldn't have?" "I won't say a thing, you can trust me." "Is that so? We need to have a common secret so that I can truly trust you. Would you like that? Would you love that? Would you love me?" The Pocketcat says as he puts his other hand to his pocket. "Please don't hurt me." The Pocketcat laughs at you with such a delicate laughter and says, Now, I would never do such a thing. The only one that has gotten hurt is me. You have deeply scarred me emotionally with your coldness. Now, would you mind warming me up again? The Pocketcat says with a glee in his eyes. I will reveal you for what you truly are. You will. But what will the others say when they hear what you did also? The Pocketcat says as his tone changes from gay to serious. The Pocketcat confronts you by saying, what happened would bring shame to both of us. The Pocketcat says, well, let us not dwell on those matters. The night is festive. It is full moon after all. While the cat-like man stares at the moon, he also murmurs something. Oh, the old one, my lullabies go to deaf ears. The humankind pursues the same goals persistently. The cat asks you one last question. If I were to get the moon itself to you, would you give up on your quest and lay with me here for tonight? Yes, I will give up on my quest. That would make me happy. The moon would be thankful as well, naturally, the Pocketcat says with great joy that has returned to his voice. No, I'm afraid I can't do that. You really are to torment my heart and souls, are you? The Pocketcat says with a sad expression on his face. While Willem's fate is not completely confirmed due to the different options the player can choose, through what we already know of Pocketcat, we can assume that Willem was either taken, perhaps to another reality or realm, or alternatively, left to live out his life, constantly being observed by Pocketcat before eventually giving in to their desires. We'll look more at that later. After reading all the Pocketcat tales, you can probably see what I mean about the style being very similar to old folklore and fairy tales. An allegedly naughty boy who doesn't listen to his mother goes into the woods. Something causes the child to go further into the woods and soon causes an imminent threat to the child, who then runs home and is scolded by their parents. Your standard cookie-cutter fairy tale. However, more true to classic fairy tales and not the retellings we often see and hear in more modern versions, most notoriously Disney, the child doesn't live happily ever after, to serve as a warning to young children and scare them into behaving. Probably because gentle parenting didn't exist in the 1800s. But as well as fairy tales, many countries and cultures will have their own folklore surrounding similar entities as Pocketcat in the real world. Examples include the Boogeyman, Baba Yaga, Sackman or El Hombre de Saco, the Jersey Devil and La Llorona. FearandHunger is set in the Kingdom of Rondon and Termina in Prehevil, Bohemia. These two countries are pretty much on opposite sides of the continent, as Rondon is based on England and Prehevil is most likely to be Prague. Ignoring the fact that we, the player, have seen and interacted with Pocketcat, it could be stipulated that Pocketcat is more than just a fairy tale, as it would be likely for the Pocketcat to go by a different name, story or image with this greater distance in both miles and cultures. Now that we have some idea of what Pocketcat is, how is it that they have come to be? They clearly aren't just a fairy tale, as we've interacted with them in both games. Pocketcat is a creation and servant of the trickster moon god Re. Re is said by the new gods to be particularly jealous, not wanting any other humans to ascend to the same level as godhood as the old gods like Almer did. This is also interesting if we take into account Mauthe Doog's theory of Olmer using the sun god to ascend. Perhaps there was some rivalry also between the moon and sun, like in other mythos in the real world, but that would need to wait for another video. Most content creators for Fear and Hunger agree that because of this jealousy, Rare created both Pocketcat and the Lady of the Moon to remove any potential vessels for ascended gods before they have the chance to ascend, as such preventing the creation of any more rival ascended gods. The girl in Fear and Hunger can be traded to the Lady of Moon for a full party heal. This will recover any lost limbs, remove any status conditions, and heal the characters to full. Alternatively, the girl can be traded to Pocketcat for a number of items, most notably a claymore, which is one of the stronger weapons to get at such an early point in the playthrough. Interestingly, while the Lady of Moon is only interested in trading the girl, Pocketcat will also trade for a Demon Kid, a summon conjured by the Sylvian spell Demon Seed found on the Hexen. This shows that Pocketcat's motivations don't just lie with appeasing or pleasing their master, Rare. Examining the stories, the weird rubbing, dialogue, and, although not canon, this video that predates the Fear and Hunger series from the creator Miro himself, it's quite clear what one of Pocketcat's motivations is, and I won't be going into further detail or discussing that further. As such, we'll move on to other possible motivations. Strangely enough, Pocketcat seems very invested in us, the player. He opens dialogue with us in both games and is extremely friendly, almost charming despite the awful habits they partake in. In Fear and Hunger, Pocketcat asks if we love them, after asking if we're a soul that walks in the path of light or of darkness. They're unhappy if we say we're of darkness and then that we love them, as they realise we must be lying. It's a contradiction. They're arguably more unhappy if we say we don't love them, stating that although they're happy that we were honest, the words still hurt. They also seem ecstatic in Termina when telling the player that they love them. If using Rare's skill Mind Read, we can see the internal dialogue of Pocketcat, who knows we're eavesdropping if they of course have the same skill. In Dungeon Nights, Pocketcat is the easiest romanceable option to take to the prom. Pocketcat addresses the player by breaking the fourth wall. In Fear and Hunger, they give us either the happy or depressed status effect to let the player know that they're always watching, and in Termina, they actually state that they recognise the player from a past life. Notably, in all three game versions, it doesn't matter which character the player is using, as Pocketcat has the same dialogue for every character, except one contestant in Termina leading us neatly into the next possible motivation. Now, it wouldn't be a true Pocketcat video without mentioning Dan, one of the contestants and playable characters in Termina. I'm sure everyone knows at this stage, but a possible outcome for Dan, if he runs out of time and becomes moon-scorched, he will actually become Pocketcat. Whether this means that Dan has now become another Pocketcat or the Pocketcat isn't exactly clear, as there may well be more than one active Pocketcat at a time. More on that later. But out of everyone in Termina, why Dan? Couldn't Pocketcat or Rare have chosen one of the other many contestants, or even one of the townsfolk? To answer that, it's believed there needs to be certain conditions met for this transformation to happen. As there aren't any confirmed details of these conditions within either of the games, these have all been theorised by myself and other creators and players, and as such these aren't entirely canonical, though evidence in the games do support these theories. If you've watched other videos on Dawn's relationship with Pocketcat, you'll certainly have heard about them talking about Dawn's blank soul. In the Fear and Hunger universe, every character has a soul. Well, except Lagarde, but he always finds some way to be special with his main character complex. But these souls work similarly to our astrology signs, where it depends on when you were born to which soul type you have. In the Fear and Hunger universe, however, these soul types don't just affect your compatibility with others. These soul types will impact the character's life choices and outcomes, and they also affect what skills you can use on the hexen. These locked skills can sometimes only be unlocked by either gaining affinity with the respective god, or by using the character's soul stone, which you can loot from them after defeating them. Dan is the only character in both games to have the blank soul. It's been heavily discussed among creators that this may have something to do with the transformation, as a blank soul is probably better to mould into something new, comparable to how it would be easier to create art on a blank canvas than one already painted. Another factor already covered in other videos is due to the tragic life Dan has led. Losing his parents barely into his teens, despite them likely being abusive, wouldn't have been easy. He then found love in a family and had to join the war effort where he saw things best left unspoken, to come home to his wife and father-in-law dead in a weird ritual circle. Dan even attempted to sacrifice parts of himself in order to bring his wife back to life, which was unfortunately unsuccessful. His late wife and father-in-law somehow did find their way to the Termina festival as needles and stitches. These events have been theorised to have been orchestrated by either Rare or Pocketcat in order to accelerate Don losing his mind and giving himself up to them. Something else to note is that there was the direct influence of Rare themselves. While allegedly Rare is dead and what we see in Termina is actually just a husk of the old god with a fraction of the power, almost every enemy we come across in the game has been infected by the influence of the moon, either being mentally unstable or fully insane due to Rare's overwhelming presence. Not to mention the moon scorching itself. Each contestant has the possibility of becoming moon scorched during the game. They all have different places they go during different times of each day, and some succumb to Rare's influence more quickly than others. One thing that they all have in common, though, is that the form they take through moon scorching is linked to either their deepest insecurities or fears. Without completely sidetracking, a couple of examples include Levi, the young soldier with PTSD, who wants to leave the war behind him, moon scorching to have a rifle fused to his face, and Abella, the engineer, becoming extremely masculine in her appearance, alluding to the male-dominant field and perhaps her insecurity over a perceived lack of femininity. With that said, does Dan fear Pocketcat? We know from Dan's character history that he lost his parents to a Sylvian ritual. They would often leave Dan home alone to perform these rituals to come back afterwards, until one day they didn't return. What happened to them hasn't been confirmed, and we can assume that Dan would have gone looking for them. It's not mentioned, but it is a possibility that young Dan may have seen something he shouldn't have. That something being Pocketcat, much like Willem in those books. Although that would be terrifying, especially for a child who had just lost their parents, I do believe that it's something far darker. As I mentioned in the introduction, I'll be issuing a further content warning. I will add chapters and a button to skip to the next section if you don't want to hear more about abuse, neglect, and sexual assault involving child victims. So again, if you aren't comfortable listening to this part, please do skip ahead. We briefly mentioned earlier that Dawn's parents were followers of the old god Sylvian, the god most known for love and creation. In Dawn's character history, it mentions that his parents shared knowledge and teachings of Sylvian to Dawn. Though in itself this may sound innocent enough, out of context, players will understand that this suggests that Dawn was sexually abused as a child. While there are spells, like loving whispers, that wouldn't require any sexual act to use them, most forms of worship for Sylvian involve either sex or sexual acts. In Fear and Hunger, as well as praying, we can also raise affinity to Sylvian by interacting with the Sylvian worshippers in bunny masks. The same rituals that Dawn's parents would partake in often in the meadows. Or alternatively by showing love on a ritual circle, which results in a marriage between the two characters. In Termina, there's also the skill masturbation, which can be used outside of combat on ritual circles to increase affinity with Sylvian. With how devout and obsessed Dan's parents were described to be with worshipping Sylvian, it is unfortunately likely that Dan was subject to either watching or forced to be involved in these rituals. Not necessarily in the meadows with others, but almost definitely in his own home with his parents guiding him. To give some real-life context, the NHS website lists some common problems associated with survivors of sexual abuse in childhood. These aren't limited to, but include low moods, feeling alone or powerless, memory problems such as repressing certain memories, shame and guilt. Dan does show all of these emotions through the course of Termina if we play as him. It's certainly suggested that Pocketcat was interested in Dan before the events in Termina, so it's possible he was repressing the memories of having witnessed them. Dan is so deep in his depression that even if he doesn't become moon-scorched, he still isn't satisfied with the lack of answers after escaping Prehoval and ponders giving in to Pocketcat's deal. I read these comments on r/FearandHunger, which influenced me to do my own research. A UK study in 2001 by Glasser et al. They found that being a male victim of sexual abuse in childhood had a positive correlation to becoming a perpetrator of pedophilia and or incest. Dan isn't afraid of Pocketcats. Dan is afraid of becoming Pocketcats. Dan, being a victim of neglect and abuse in childhood, and now a doctor dedicated to helping people, is scared to continue the cycle of abuse by becoming like his parents. Quite literally, Dan is scared to don an animal mask representing an old god and carry out harmful and despicable acts. He's scared that deep down he's just a degenerate like his parents were. The last reasons why Dan may have been chosen both interlink together. I've seen several comments made about how Dan was perhaps meant to be a servant of Sylvian with his upbringing. It makes sense that they may have used Dan to bring about some form of change for her, as all of the old gods seem to be dead at this point. The only thing that's left are the fragments of their influence. Perhaps Dan's parents purposely planned the pregnancy around the birth so that he'd be born under the blank soul, so that they could use him to create either a new god like the god of fear and hunger, or something else to bring Sylvian's blessings to others without the need of a new god. To link in with this, as mentioned before, Rare seems to enjoy irony with being a trickster. The irony that instead of having the gift of creation to become something that only takes your limbs, takes your children, even taking you to restart the cycle all over again. It's almost even more of a kick in the teeth that the Lady of Moon we mentioned earlier does have very strong healing capabilities, rivaling that of Sylvian when drawing her sigil in Termina in Fear and Hunger, when showing love, Even Pocketcat has the ability to heal our limbs in Termina, and they are even more bloodthirsty than the other servants. We've only seen one transformation, so it's unclear whether any or all of these factors need to align in order for this to occur. It may even need to wait for the next game or for Miro to confirm some of these theories posed by the community. I believe there's definitely more to Pocketcat than first meets the eye. It's easy to overlook some details until you're actually invested in such a weird deep dive fueled by purely a hyperfixation that seems unending when you're 10 pages into a script. But moving on to what potential powers Pocketcat has. So far in the games we have seen 3 separate Pocketcats, 4 if you count the Headmaster and Dungeon Knights being a different Pocketcat. And while we haven't seen them all in the same room at the same time yet, I do think that it's likely there are multiple Pocketcats existing at the same time. If we view the cat masks as an expression of rare worship, the same as the bunny masks for Sylvian worshippers and the wolf masks for Grogroth worshippers, it's entirely possible that, much like in Fear and Hunger where you can lose yourself to the ritual, if there are any rituals for worshipping rare, it's likely to be easier to lose yourself to rare with the imagery of lunacy signified in both the games and in real life. If there were multiple Pocketcats, as I theorise, this, along with moving through dream dimensions and golden gates, makes it very possible for Pocketcat to be in several places at once, as well as moving between places relatively quickly and easily. At the end of the second Pocketcat book in Fear and Hunger, before we make the choices, the player notices that it feels like we're being watched. After choosing the options, if you try to reopen the book, the pages are stuck together, whereas in Termina it says the rest is illegible due to being smudged, as though someone didn't want us to read any further. From this, we could theorise that Pocketcat is either able to watch the player through any media depicting them, or the more terrifying theory that Pocketcat can watch anyone through media depicting them. This may also be partly to do with the 2 skills we mentioned briefly from Termina, Mind Read and Golden Gates, both of which are in Rare's Affinity of the Hexen, and both have evidence of Pocketcat using. The Mind Read, as we mentioned earlier in the fight with Pocketcat where they notice us eavesdropping, and the Golden Gates where we can see a room dedicated to Pocketcat filled with bloody sacks and children's toys. It's possible that the books may form as their own gate, allowing Pocketcat to read the person's mind while they're reading the book, similar to the famous quote from Nietzsche, "If you gaze too long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you." Looking into Pocketcat, learning about Pocketcat allows him in. At the end of the Pocketcat story in Fear and Hunger, Zuldim notices that Pocketcat has grown to the size of a house, which scares him greatly before we're given options within the book itself. We also see Pocketcat grow and distort in both Fear and Hunger and Termina. In Termina, when Dan is undergoing moon scorching, Pocketcat grows and wraps their arms around Dan. The imagery is very clear to portray Dan in Pocketcat's grasp. The character will only see this scene if playing as Dan and becoming moon-scorched. In Fear and Hunger, if we haven't given the girl to Pocketcat, if you deny to give him the girl at this last stage, his arms and torso grow, giving him this menacing stance. The scene feels like it should end the run right there, and we'd have to go back to a previous save. However, Pocketcat asks their master, presumably Rare, for guidance. They let us go. This is a somewhat pleasant surprise until we later find out what the girl turns into. Perhaps this was a better resolution for Rare to see a mere human meddling in affairs best left to old gods, then be struck with the ultimate "I told you so" right at the end. Another irony that Rare seems to be so fond of. In a theory by Frapollo, he suggests that dungeon nights may actually be some kind of dream dimension where Pocketcat has Lagarde chained up and playable characters trapped in this bizarre dating sim. Supporting this theory, we do see dream manipulation from Pekali in Termina, who claims to be a servant of Rare until the end, where they're revealed to actually be a servant of Sulfur. This doesn't mean that Pekali wasn't initially created by Rare. Pekali is thought to be based from the Finnish word pekel, which is a harsh swear roughly translated as devil's cunt, but allegedly used more commonly as goddamn. But I'm not Finnish, so don't come at me. If we take this into context though, it's inferred that Pekali either abandoned or betrayed Rare before becoming a servant of Sulfur. As Pekali has this dream manipulation, and it's entirely possible that Pocketcat also has this power. And that's pretty much everything. Despite this being one of the most in-depth pieces I've written, there's still so many mysteries and so much unconfirmed. As frustrating as it is, it's definitely what makes the character so interesting. The more we find out, the more questions there are. As much as I'd like to find out once and for all the full history and myth-busting of Pocketcat, I think that it would lose an important part, the part that truly makes them Pocketcat. But thanks for watching. As mentioned in the start, I've put everything in the description for you all to check out. Some honourable mentions to Wormgirl, Frapollo, Super Eyepatch Wolf, Mauthe Doog, All Bones Jones and Zuldim. Although there are so many content creators for Fear and Hunger, these are particular creators that got me started on my journey with Fear and Hunger. I would highly recommend their content if you're just getting started on the game series, for their in-depth lore videos, theories and tutorials. And honestly, if any of you are watching, thank you. This has been such a fascinating journey.